Hey guys, it's Phil, and welcome back to another episode of Earth, Nails, and Tales. Today we're going to be heading out into the garden. We're going to be planting some fall vegetables for Zone 8. So let's get started. So today we're going to be doing a few different things. We're going to be starting out with kale, then we're going to be doing squash, beets, and then peas and beans. So these are some vegetables that you could start here in, as I said, Zone 8. And all of these things are based off of your first frost date, which your zone can help you identify. Really, if you go on the internet, you can look up what zone you're in, and you'll find probably a very colorful map of the United States if you're in the United States. You could probably also find it if you're in other countries as well. But all of those zones identify your coldest temperature, and usually the first frost date will also be related to your colder temperatures. So, for example, in Zone 8, the temperatures here won't go below 15 degrees, 10 to 15 degrees at the minimum, and that defines our zone. So everything that I'll be planting today is based on our last frost date, which will be in 87 days from today, so about November 18th. So everything that I have here has a maturity time of less than 87 days, so we can make sure that we get a crop for the first fall frost. So overall this season we're going to be growing 12 Swis Chard plants in this area, and that should be plenty of us to feed myself and my wife. And then we'll have some more to share with our friends and family for those people that actually like Swis Chard. So what you want to do is just look at your bag or your seeds, and you want to plant it exactly like the directions say. So for this one right here, this is a 60-day variety, so I know that we'll get Swis Chard before the frost, and Swis Chard can actually handle a light frost, so I know I'll get some growth out of this before the frost comes. And then it also tells me that I want to plant this at a soil temperature between 50 and 85 degrees. So today it's about 84 degrees. Summer's starting to cool off a little bit, so I know it's the right time to be planting this. And I'm going to sow it to a depth of 1/2 an inch. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to succession plant these, which means that I'm going to plant a little bit now, I'm going to wait a few weeks, I'm going to plant a little bit more, I'm going to wait a few weeks. So that way you don't get all of your plants all at the same time. This is very beneficial if you want to have your plant extend over a longer period, and that way you're not overwhelmed with all the vegetables that you get at one time. So I'm looking here, the plant spacing is between 6 and 16 inches. So you always want to plant extra, just because you want to ensure that you're going to have germination of these seeds. But something special about a beet variety is that when you look at the seed, which I'll show you, it actually looks like a cluster, and each one of these clusters is actually multiple seeds. So you don't have to worry about planting this on a beet variety, but every other variety of vegetable you're going to want to make sure that you plant extra. So all I'm going to do here is I want to plant about 4 plants. So we have our soil ready, and I'm just going to make, as it said, a 1/2 inch, so I'm going to make a 1/2 inch furrow about 1/4 or halfway down this bed. So from here to here is where all of this is going to be Swis Chard. So I'm going to make this furrow about 1/2 inch deep, and I'll make sure that all this extra comes out. And then all I'm going to do is just sprinkle these seeds in here, every 3 or 4 inches or so, just to make sure that we're getting as many as we need. And if that way, the soil doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, and you'll still be good with your germination. So that's it. That's all I'm going to do for the Swis Chard. So I'm going to just cover this up and then pat it down. And then after I do all of my seeds today, I'll make sure I go back and water the soil really well. Ideally, you want the soil very, very moist, but as you can see here, I'm picking the soil up and it's pretty moist already, sticking together pretty well. So the rule of thumb for watering after you plant your seedlings is you want to water because the soil can't absorb all the moisture at once. So you want to do a watering walk away, do your next set, walk away, do your next set, and then by the time you're done watering all of your seedlings, come back and then water it again. And then once you're done, you want to stick your finger in soil and make sure that the water is penetrating deeply into the soil, because you want that moisture to stay in, especially when the plants are germinating. A really good thing to do, especially if you live in a hotter climate, is put mulch over these, which will help keep the moisture and help with the seeds with germination. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to be planting over here is the collards. Again, I'm going to be succession planting these, so I'm going to be planting about half now and then half again later. So this bag right here isn't as descriptive on how to plant these seeds. It specifically says sow no deeper than 2 to 4 times the seed diameter. Usually whenever it says that, you want to plant a seed between 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, and I've seen that's the best depth to get the best germination. So I'm going to come over here to this back bed. So we do have a little bit of weeds here, but that's okay. I'm going to know where I'm going to be planting these, so I'll just come back later and clean up the weeds. Ideally, you want to clean up these weeds before you start planting, but that's all right. So I'm going to plant half these collards now. And collards have a very similar spacing to other brassicas, like broccoli or cauliflower. So I'm going to space these guys around 8 to 12 inches apart. So again, since I'm planting half of my seeds, and we want about, again, 12 plants for these, I'm just going to make a furrow along the back here. So that way the bigger plants will be along the back, and then I'll plant the next succession up in front of them. So I'm just going to draw or make a furrow here across the whole bed. And then I'm just going to take my seeds, and then I'm just going to sprinkle them in across this furrow. And again, you want to use a little bit extra because you want to make sure that you're going to have good seed germination. Hopefully Neptune doesn't come by and eat these all up like she's doing right now. So again, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch, get those seeds in the furrow, and then we're all planted. So I'm trying to give you guys advice on how to plant seeds properly, but really what I'm showing here is how this garden is starting and then what it's going to turn out to be. That's really what we're looking for here. So next we're going to be planting some squash and zucchini. So for zones 8, 9, and 10, maybe 7, you can probably get some squash plants in, but they do take a little bit longer than most other vegetables, especially leafy greens. We actually can't even plant leafy greens here yet in zone 8 because it's still too warm. The leafy greens usually like a colder environment, so I'll be doing another add-on video to this once it gets cooler, just to show you guys how to plant those. But if you're in a cooler zone like 7, 6, 5, 4, now might be a good time for you to get those vegetables in. So make sure you look at your zone, understand when your last frost date is, look at your seed packages again, and see how many days it takes for those things to mature, and then you can probably get those in the ground right about now. So let's move over to the squash beds over here. So if you saw my earlier videos, I did have, or see some pictures on our Instagram or our website, we did have squashes here, and they were beautiful this year. So ideally you don't want to plant the same plant in the same place because different plants use up different nutrients. So if you're going to plant the same thing in the same spot, you need to make sure that all of the nutrition is re-energized into the soil. So I've previously done this. I've added a little bit of compost and some fertilizer. So I'm pretty confident that I'm going to have a good harvest with these. And then I'll also practice crop rotation in the next 3 years to move my plants around so they won't be planted in the same spot. So after this fall, squash will not be in this bed for another 4 years. So basically 3 other different types of plants will be here before the squashes come back to this spot. Oh, and as you can see, we had some beans interplanted with our squash here, and you can see that a bean plant has self-seeded itself and it's growing. So I'm going to leave that guy because whole beans make great companion plants for squash. So we're going to grow some yellow squash squash here. So I only want a couple plants. Usually the rule of thumb for squashes is that you want to plant 3 seeds close together, and they like to be about 2 feet apart. So I'm going to put one plant right here, and I'm just going to move this out of the way. And again, make sure you read your package. This says about row spacing 3 to 4 feet apart, planting depth 1 inch. So again, this is a lot deeper, twice as deep as the other seeds that I've planted so far. So what we're going to do, again, just take a piece of wood, and I'm going to make 3 holes. 1, 2, 3, and those are about 1 inch deep. And then I'm just going to plop one of these seeds into each of those holes. So I got 3 seeds. Chances are at least one of them will germinate. Hopefully all of them do, and then we'll see which one's the strongest. So again, lightly cover that, and then highly recommend mulching in the warmer climates. Alright, and then we're also going to be planting some Italian zucchini, which will be going on this side over here. So right across. Something that I do want to get that I haven't gotten yet is set up a trellis for these guys. So hopefully a video in the future, I'll be talking a little bit more about trellises and the importance of supporting your plants for healthier growth. So again, same thing for these guys, same family. The seeds look very similar. I'm going to do the same thing. 1, 2, 3. Cover those. And then I'm actually, as I said, I want to plant 2 plants, so I'm going to do another one about here. 1, 2, 3. Those up. And then I did forget to do the other yellow squash, so we'll do a little bit more of those. Get them about the same distance apart. And again, I'm really doing this so you guys can see how the garden is transforming over this period of time. Right? It's pretty amazing to me that you can still grow plants this late into the season and get crop almost like a second summer harvest, even though we're going into fall. Alright, so next thing we're going to be doing is planting beets. So again, the Swis Chard that we just planted, same family as the beet family, so I'm not going to go into much detail. They're pretty much planted the same way. But I'm going to be planting a 3-root variety, so there's 3 different types of beets in here. And I'm going to be planting half of our beets because you'll be able to plant these a little bit more often. You do want to succession plant these, but these take a lot more time to grow than most. Usually these bags say about 50 days, but I really think they take longer than that, really between 50 and 80 days. So I'm going to be planting half of them now because I want to make sure that I can get them before the frost. So again, following the package, this one says soil temperature 50 to 85, planting depth at ½ inch, final spacing 2 to 4 inches, and row spacing 12 to 18 inches. So previously in the spring I had cauliflower and beets in this bed. I had the beets growing almost in the cross direction, and I had the cauliflower in the corner, so now I'm going to switch it. I'm going to have cauliflower here, there, and there, and I'm going to be growing the beets in the corners. So I don't have my cauliflower started yet because that's one of the cooler season crops. Cauliflower is actually very picky, so I'll be starting those inside, and I'll talk about that more later. But there are a lot of vegetables that I start inside before I plant them out or transplant them outside. So I'm just going to clear, like a 2 by 2 foot space for these guys. And then again, I'm going to make some furrows. 2, 3, do about 4 furrows. So I want to get about 16 beets out of this area here. Maybe not that many, maybe probably more like 12. And get these out. So I do have a few different varieties. I personally really love beets. So I do have some different varieties that I can plant. So this will be a good mixture to get this 3-root variety. And I'm going to be planting it in this corner and that corner. So we'll have hopefully have a good harvest, in a couple months. again, make sure you guys are weeding before you start. And I know for weeds, you kind of have to pull them out because you don't want them to grow back. But if you're clearing a plot from a previous harvest, I highly recommend just cutting the vegetable off at the base and then leaving the roots in, because when the roots decay, they'll leave a lot of spaces for air and water to travel, and it'll also give something for the worms in your soil to eat, which will help benefit your soil, basically adding free worm compost or worm manure into your garden, which is really, really good for nutrition for all of your vegetables. So something that I'll be talking about in another video that I'll be doing for you guys is the importance of your soil. So make sure you go over to the other video that I'm going to be posting, and I'll put the link up right here. And it's going to be talking about the different types of soil. Specifically, I bought a bag of Collards soil, which is a lot of people know for being really good soil. And then I also bought some bags of Miracle-Gro soil and some grow bags off of Amazon. So that way, any of you guys watching this will be able to watch that video and basically go out to the store today, buy some soil, and get some vegetables in the ground exactly like I'm doing right now, which means that you're going to be harvesting your vegetables about the same time that I will be. So make sure you check out that video if you're new to gardening. Alright, so those beets are done, and then the last thing that we're going to do today in the garden is planting our green beans. One of my wife's favorite vegetables. So coming over to this bed, as you can see, unfortunately this bed has been sitting for a while. We haven't had anything in here since we've had broccoli, which we had in obviously the very early spring. And then we just did install these raised beds in here. So we did have some mounded soil that we basically made lasagna beds just to get this soil looking a little bit better than what it was. And now that we established that soil, we decided to make raised beds just to make the management of itself easier. So as you can see, I do have some weeds here, so I'm just going to get these out real quick. And honestly, putting in mulch, in my opinion, you should be putting about 2 to 3 inches of compost on your garden every fall. And that compost will continue to break down over the winter, and it'll also provide a protective layer for your soil. So you never want to leave your soil bare, because there's microorganisms in the soil that are actually providing the nutrition for your plants. So you want to make sure that your soil is always covered. One, it helps the uptake of nutrition by your vegetables, and it also protects the soil, and it prevents weeds from occurring. So that's why it's extremely important. So I'm going to be doing half of my green beans here. So I have some purple beauties, and I also have some bush beans, and then I also have some peas. So since my elderberry bush is in the way here, I am going to be planting peas in the back, but it's pretty much the exact same thing as planting the green beans. So I'll save that, but I'm going to be doing the beans here. So I'm going to be planting half of my variety today. So again, reading the package, we want to plant these 1 inch deep. Beans like to be very, very deep. And one thing that I would recommend too, you can actually soak these guys before you plant them, and it'll help your germination. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do half and half of these. So I'm going to make my furrow all the way down this bed. In the same way that I've been doing all the rest of the beans, just dropping them in, planting extra, so that way you can make sure that you're getting proper germination. Alright guys, so the main reason I'm planting beans here is because I had heavy feeding vegetables. As I said before, I had broccoli plants planted here. So I'm going to be planting legumes, which are beans and peas. Some other legumes that you might know are soybeans and peanuts. Those are all legumes. And one thing that they do really well is they help fixate the soil. And what that means is they pull the nitrogen in from the air and they inject it into the soil. So the reason why I'm putting them here is because I had very heavy feeders, broccoli, and then I'm also going to be putting them in this bed right here, which is my nightshade bed, where I have my peppers, tomatoes, eggplants. I'm going to be putting them in there after I cut out these plants because I want to regenerate that soil naturally with legumes. So amazing plant to do. You can also do this with cover cropping, and if you have this space, I highly recommend trying to cover crop at least a quarter of your garden every year. And for me, my cover cropping will always follow my nightshades because nightshades do take a lot of nutrition out of that soil, and the legumes will help with that. So by now, I think you guys have an idea of how to plant your seeds, just making sure that you're properly reading the seed package before you plant them, and just have an idea of where you want to plant them. And again, if you don't have a garden like this, or if you're new to gardening, make sure you check out the other video that I have, which I'll be posting, which will be how to plant your fall vegetables for a new gardener, which will be utilizing grow bags, and that'll really help you guys get started. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned because we're going to see how this garden is going to grow through the season. See ya.